Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy, and we're in the new studio. It's not quite finished yet. We still got to hang up these pictures of the tree, but we're here. There was attack on a military facility, which some ICE agents were staying at in San Francisco, California. We're going to get into that. The clip's a little bit violent, so we're going to bury the lead story a little bit and go with Mark Carney and what's going on in Canada. It looks like there may be a snap election coming pretty soon.
And we're happy you're back, and we're happy to be back. And thank you all so much for your patience. If you have any comments, questions, etc., please leave them in the chat, as Rafa has now done, saying hello, lost people. Hello, and sorry for abandoning you and everybody else.
Yeah, it's a lot different with this set because we're using tungsten lights. The ceiling lights were yellow, so then I had to put these yellow filters in. So, but on camera, I guess it white balances. So.
And we do still have to hang some things, like all these things you see thrown around over there. We have to figure out how to do that into concrete and a bunch of other stuff.
And we got some spotlights we're still buying.
Yes.
Okay, let's get into the first story, though.
Let's see if I remember how to do this. Oh, and Rafa says, what an amazing place. Thank you. Hopefully it'll keep getting better and better. Hold on.
I was a little disappointed in the two shot, actually. Me and your shots I liked a lot better. Let me center.
But we will start with Canada because apparently they're doing everything wrong. And Mark Carney is just about to hit the wall and regret it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess Doug Ford had put out a ad with Ronald Reagan talking about how Ronald Reagan didn't like tariffs. That's a problem because Trump immensely respects Ronald Reagan, and Reagan actually used tariffs just a little bit here and there to get what he needed, especially out of Japan. If you know the Make America Great slogan, that slogan actually originated with Ronald Reagan, and Trump adopted that slogan and made it its own. A lot of people don't know that about him, but let's get a little bit into the first story.
Sure. And we will do, for at least right now this week, mostly X stuff, just because we have been out of the game for a bit, but oh no, I dropped something. Oh,
that's okay.
So, breaking, Doug Ford's fake Reagan ad just went global. Sky News Australia now covering the $75 million scandal, because it cost $75 million, that caused Trump to terminate all trade talks with Canada.
Well, let's talk about that just for a second. Okay. It cost $75 million because Doug Ford is the Premier of Ottawa, who's working in conjunction with Mark Carney to make this ad, and they placed it during the World Series. They placed it on Fox News, News Nation. They're placing it in all the places Trump would see it. Trump has now said the tariff negotiations are off, and as much as I don't like Sheinbaum, she looks to be playing these tariff negotiations perfectly with Donald Trump so far, especially compared to Canada.
And yeah, I don't like to give flowers to that woman, but oh well. So let's see what is happening. Hold on. And this is thanks to Mark Nixon.
Well, breaking news, Donald Trump has declared the US is ceasing all trade negotiations with Canada. The US president says the country used a fake ad featuring former President Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Jobs and growth are at stake.
Okay, we can leave it there. And I really did like Ronald Reagan, but now that I got a little bit older and I researched, Reagan was really the beginning of the uniparty in the United States, where the left and the right disagreed on minor issues, but all the big globalist things behind the scenes, they kind of united on.
So let's actually look at the timeline of how this happened. Thanks to CBC. Once again, as we always say, CBC is Canadian state-sponsored media because they are highly subsidized by the government. So take it with a grain of salt. But they say a timeline of the ad that led to Trump terminating trade talks with Canada. Ontario government launched ad campaign featuring Ronald Reagan last week. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has terminated trade negotiations with Canada over Ontario government ad that uses former President Ronald Reagan's own words to spread an anti-tariff message to an American audience. It's the latest turmoil in ongoing trade negotiations. So apparently,
and I will kind of say this. I think this has a different undertone because last week before the ad aired, I guess Trump had seen it. He actually commended them and said he would do the same thing. And now he's pulling out the rug from under Canada, stopping all tariff negotiations. That being said, a lot of people don't know, and I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, but Canada is set to start negotiations with a tariff agreement with China and a bigger trade negotiation with China. So if Trump says he's out, he's not negotiating with Canada, the Chinese may start leveraging their position to really disenfranchise the Canadians and get a better deal for China, a worse deal for Canada. And then when the US-Canada negotiations restart, it will be very easy for Trump to kind of give a better deal than the Chinese did.
So on Tuesday, October 14th, they launched the $75 million ad campaign, 1-minute ad featuring a voiceover from Ronald Reagan. And although it did include the original address defending some tariffs in the U.S. that the U.S. had imposed on Japan, parts of the advertisement focused on Reagan's views on tariffs.
Yeah, and I will say this. I did watch the entire speech, and it was much longer than that. He talked about Japan when Reagan was putting 100% tariff on Japan. He also talked about Canada in that speech. So it was the perfect speech for a marketer to kind of clip and rearrange the words to say kind of what they wanted. The fact that they're going to air this on the World Series where it's a Canadian team versus the Los Angeles Dodgers, this is just going to upset Trump more. They're trying to start a conflict amongst the American people and the Republicans versus the MAGA. And Doug Ford himself kind of said that the other day live on camera, which is kind of crazy that he would even say that something like that publicly, because you could only expect the wrath of Donald Trump after that.
And then as the days went on, eventually on Tuesday, Globe and Mail reported that Canada could be days away from a trade deal with the U.S. However, the ad kept going and things kept getting worse and worse for Mark Carney and Canada in general, as they have been for a while now.
Well, yeah, and then Mark Carney came out with a statement. Why don't we go right into his statement, actually?
So from Marianoffel, Prime Minister Mark Carney says we can no longer rely on the U.S., says this decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States is now over. As a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country based on close ties to America have become our vulnerabilities. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner.
And it kind of looks like Mark Carney's going to frame this. He needs to frame this in a way to show that Donald Trump's impossible to negotiate with so he can bring Canada in alignment with China. Now, I much prefer Mexico's strategy, and Mexico is playing this great. I really hope they get a good deal from this.
And Mexico has also been doing quite a bit of good negotiation as well. He gave this speech. Is this from the speech he gave at a college?
Yeah, why don't we just play the speech?
Sure.
So, because of these advantages, over decades, our economy grew steadily more integrated with the United States through the Free Trade Agreement of the 1980s, the NAFTA Accord of the 1990s, and eventually USMCA agreement signed in 2018. Canada's trade increased by over 400% during that period, and our economy doubled in size. But this process, this decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States, is now over. And as a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country, former strengths more particularly as our economy, strengths based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And as a result of that, the jobs of workers in our industries most affected by the U.S. tariffs in autos and steel and lumber.
Okay. You can leave it there. And that being said, Mark Carney has not released his budget. He's almost a year overdue at this point. He's supposed to release it on November 4th, mandatorily. it looks like the other parties probably aren't going to approve that, and they may actually call a snap election. The rumor is Carney might actually want that. His big opponent is Pierre Poilievre. He's beat him once in the last election. If he can beat him again in quick order, the thinking of the Liberals is that he'll kind of fade away, and there isn't another rising star in the Conservative Party to kind of come up. The NDP, which is a minority party, the Liberals think they can kind of finish if they get another election. I don't know. I really hope if there is an election, Pierre Poilievre does win, as much as he is a traditional rhino or Republican in name only.
And the Conservatives in Canada align a lot more with more liberal views as well in general. So it's not the same as other Conservative parties elsewhere. And they have been failing quite a bit as well. Although lately they've been doing some good moves. I'm going to read some comments as well.
Oh, okay.
Andy W says the set looks great. Thank you. It's all Guy's hard work. So
well, it's not quite done, but yeah, it's been stressful the last few days. A lot of moving.
It's a work in process. And hopefully we have no technical difficulties. Please do let us know if the sound works, if the clips work, if everything works, because it helps us to better.
Yeah, it was a lot of cabling. If you could see the whole set, there is a ton of wiring, and I was just praying that we got it right. You kind of went on WDW Pro the other day as a guest appearance, and that let us test it, but this is the first full go, so we'll see what happens.
Yes, but let's see the opposite side of it.
And before we show this clip, this is Pierre Poilievre. He's the major opposition leader. I think he should have had a different strategy where he kind of aligns with Trump, praises Trump, and says he can get a deal by working with Trump. The Canadians have to know at this point, the U.S. is going to get the better of the deal, but a deal with America, which is like 80% of their economy, is absolutely mandatory unless they want to go into a Great Depression.
Mm-hmm. So from the Pleb Reporter, Pierre Poilievre refuses, and he's from the Conservative Party of Canada. Pierre Poilievre refuses to apologize for his comment about ex-RCMP commissioner who helped Trudeau avoid criminal charges. He says that nobody is above the law when it comes to corruption, including politicians, although...
One moment, though. This particular clip, the Liberals were really trying to bury Pierre Poilievre by saying that he is trying to cause trouble by prosecuting former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and they have their liberal news machine or the mainstream media just going after him. Since this news came out of this tariff negotiation being completely put on pause, they're not able to hit him on this subject anymore, but this was from a couple days ago, and I did grab the clip because this was starting to become a controversy. Now it's no longer in the headlines.
Former Prime Minister should be in jail.
That's not what I said.
Well,
That's not
what
what I
I
said.
heard. What did you
That's
say
not what I
then?
said.
Repeat what you said.
Sure, I'll tell you what I said. I was asked about the scandals of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. And what would I do if such scandals and corruption were to happen when I become Prime Minister? And I said I would have zero tolerance for corruption. Nobody is above the law. So if I could, in certain cases, I think there were scandals in the Liberal government that would be appropriately punished in that way. You think of the Green Slush Fund, where individuals were appointed to a board to manage public funds. And what did they do with it? They gave it to themselves. To me, that is a crime for which they should have been held responsible. People have got to be held responsible for corruption. And if you look at my remarks, that's what I said.
And that being said, this brings up a good kind of case study. Canada brought all these green policies in. A lot of politicians' friends started opening these companies. They were funding billions of dollars to them. These people should be prosecuted, especially Justin Trudeau. It looks like Mark Carney was the architect of a lot of this behind the scenes, and he's continuing to do more of the same. Canada is the most wealthy country when it comes to natural resources, water, electricity, lumber. They are sitting on an absolute gold mine, but instead of going into those things, they want to funnel money to their friends in the green sector. This is a complete scam, and the Canadian people need to start standing up.
And also, when the budget comes out, it might also explode things in a way, and that's why we might see maybe an election, but also the Canadian dollar falling even more.
Yeah, it's expected the Canadian dollar could fall off a cliff in short order after after this budget is kind of released. It's expected to be $60 to $100 billion. This is a crazy amount of money for Canada. Canada kind of touts they have the lowest debt in the G7. Of course they do. They have the smallest population, but per capita they do not.
And also during the speech he did give earlier this week, where he kind of talked about the budget, he did say and mostly focused on more spending and more things he wanted to do, and also telling the Canadian people, especially the younger people, that they're going to have to kind of suck it up, which is not very prime ministerial in my
he's talking
opinion.
This is a generational investment. Looks like a generational scam where he's going to be in and out and start funneling money to his corporate friends in green energy, his family, his people like Brookfield Management. This is absolutely insane. He is trying to rip the Canadian people off for probably the largest theft in Canadian history. A generational investment he doesn't need. What he needs to do is unlock private industry so the Canadian government itself doesn't need to make the investment. They work in conjunction with private industry and take a cut, and all the investment actually comes from private industry. They have all the natural resources. They just have to get rid of the red tape. So these oil companies, these mining companies will actually want to come in. Instead of getting rid of the red tape, it almost looks like he's working with the Americans by keeping the red tape up. So all these businesses flee to the US, which they've already started, especially the auto sector.
And unfortunately, both the Canadian government and most of the Canadian people, because they haven't really stood up against it, want to continue with this govern me harder, daddy kind of way of doing things, which has not worked, will continue not to work, and will continue to put Canada in a deficit and lower everything, quality of life, everything.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting if an election is called. I mean, now is the last ditch effort for Pierre Poilievre. I didn't think he was going to have a chance. If there is an election, Canada will have one last shining hope. And Pierre Poilievre, as much as he does some things good, some things bad, he does have a roadmap for Canada which involves the mining sector, the oil and natural gas sector, the water sector, electricity, all the things that you need. He also wants to build pipelines, not just to the US, but to the coasts, so he can unlock the international market. The Liberals have been in power in Canada for over a decade, and they refuse to invest in infrastructure projects because they want to have these green projects, funnel billions to their friends, and then have these green companies declare bankruptcy. And people are wondering where the money's gone. The money's gone because these companies have declared bankruptcy, like battery factories, like the automotive sector. The Canadian government has given billions to the automotive sector. Now the automotive sector says they're going to the US and they're just going to take those billions the Canadian government gave them and go to the bank.
And just managing the Canadian people's money as well. We just had a scandal in Canada about how the pension plan has been handled and how they've essentially gambled with people's money and people's savings, but we'll get into that in a few days. But for now, let's see the different sides of Mark Carney. From Tokyo Rosie, Mark Carney says one thing to kiss Trump's behind and another thing to the elbows up people.
We're going to play both clips here. One was the speech that we just kind of showed that happened in the last couple of days. The last time was when Mark Carney was at the White House. He's talking out both sides of his ass, and this was what most global liberals do. He wants to get a deal with Trump, so he's just going to lie his ass off, and then he's going to lie to the Canadian people because he wants to steal their money.
Largest foreign investor in the United States. $500 billion in the last 5 years alone, probably $8 trillion in the next 5 years if we get the agreement that we expect to get. Thirdly, there are areas, as the president just said, where conflict, maybe not so much conflict, we compete. There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works. But there are more areas where we are stronger together, and that's what we're focused on. And we're going to get.
And now for a few days ago.
This decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States is now over.
And that's just not that many days, weeks apart.
Well, and he keeps saying he's going to diversify the Canadian economy, so he's making these trips around the world, mainly because he doesn't want to be in Parliament and have to engage in a debate. But he came back from Germany, no deal. He just has words. He came back from Mexico saying he has better relations and they're planning this and that. But the Mexican president came directly out and said she's not going to piss off Donald Trump by having a bilateral agreement with Canada. She's going to prioritize the United States, which she needs to do. And that's what Canada needed to do. Canada thought they would talk tough to the Americans. The Americans hold all the cards. Doug Ford himself's acting a lot like a Trump figure. The problem is he has none of the power to actually back it up.
And also with Mark Carney, I mean, he was this investment banker. He was involved in other banks. He managed the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada before. And now he used to manage Brookfield Asset Management, which funnily enough went to New York and to the New York Stock Exchange right before he became prime minister. But now it seems there's more scandals coming up about Brookfield Asset Management itself. So from Michael Cooper, tax avoidance expert says Carney's Brookfield is Canada's largest tax dodger, even though Mark Carney loves taxes and that's how he plans to pay for all of these things he wants to give the Canadian people and put Canada more into debt. But apparently he can't even manage his own asset company in taxes. So let's see what was confirmed. Brookfield evaded over $6.5 billion in Canadian taxes.
And in case people don't know the Canadian economy, Brookfield Asset Management is like the BlackRock of Canada. It's an international investment firm. It's now moved to the United States. It moved just before the last election so Carney could cover up his own financial dealings.
On page 12 of your report, there is reference to Brookfield's tax gap over the last 5 years between 2017 and 2021. Just so that I'm clear on what a tax gap means, it is measuring the difference between taxes actually paid and taxes that would have been paid if the statutory Canadian tax rate had been applied to profits reaped. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And according to your analysis, or the analysis cited in your report, Brookfield's tax gap in just 5 years between 2017 to 2021 was over $6.5 billion. Is that right?
That's correct. And that was based on research done by the Canadians for Tax Fairness and by some analysis from the Toronto Star as well.
So it would be fair to say that the extent of Brookfield's tax avoidance, taxes that it should have otherwise paid in Canada in just 5 years, was over $6.5 billion.
Yes, I mean, the tax gap is looking at the statutory rate, and there are some reasons why legitimate reasons why companies pay below that, but that's an indication of a major underpayment of taxes that, in the spirit of the law, should have been paid in Canada to finance public
Okay, we can
services
stop
in
it there.
Yeah,
And it's very interesting because Brookfield Asset Management, the majority of their assets are not based in Canada. They're actually based in the United States. So if Canada fails and the United States succeeds by taking a lot of their manufacture, a lot of their companies, a lot of their oil companies, mining companies, Brookfield Asset Management, and in turn, Mark Carney are the ones to actually benefit the most.
And it's no surprise. I mean, it is infuriating, and especially for Canadian people that do have to pay taxes up to 25 to 30%. And that's just for regular people. Like, I never made a lot of money and I used to pay up the wazoo in taxes. So it's infuriating that he wants to use taxes, essentially, people's money, to fund all of these things he wants to do, and yet put Canada more in debt as well.
Well, there's another wrinkle to the story you might not have heard about, and that's about Social Security and Social Security benefits within Canada. Social Security is invested into the stock market primarily, and a lot of it is invested in the American stock market. That's why they have gotten such a good return on their Social Security. Mark Carney and Brookfield Asset Management are also invested in the American stock market because that gives the best returns, and the future is looking bright. The problem is Mark Carney is there is talks that he's going to invest all social all social security money from Canadians into Canadian companies, which would have been okay if you'd done that from the beginning and built up Canadian companies. But now it's almost like he's saying, I can invest in the American stock market along with Brookfield Asset Management, but you guys can't. You're going to have to get a much lower return. And this is putting Social Security within Canada in real jeopardy, especially because he wants to invest it in things like green energy, which the rest of the world is kind of turning away. He actually wrote a book, and he was one of the global architects of the new carbon strategy and all these green companies. Now that the globe is kind of turning away from that, all of his plans are kind of falling apart.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out. I was trying to check if it's
You were
still
waving.
up.
You were waving.
We are apparently still up. But now for the actual story that you wanted to talk about, which just happened, and I didn't even know because I was still setting things up earlier today. But from Chad Prather, Trump might need to start thinking about the Insurrection Act. This is nuts. Shots fired after leftist militants attempted to ram through the gate of a Coast Guard base in Oakland, California to target ICE agents.
Yeah, this was very interesting. And this is the one that I really thought we were going to lead with, and it was breaking, but I thought it was a little bit too violent and YouTube might censor us. So we went with the Canadian stories first, but let's get into this and let's kind of give a little bit of the background on this. The details are a little murky, but it looks like this was a military facility this attack happened at. It was the U.S. Coast Guard where ICE agents were staying. The U.S. Coast Guard is considered to be part of the U.S. military. Therefore, federal agents can stay in the barracks and other places on base while they're planning their ICE raids. There was information that came in from supposedly big tech sources, some executives at big tech, directly to Donald Trump to call off the ICE raids in San Francisco. Supposedly something was going to happen. Trump called them off, but these protesters figured out where these ICE agents were staying. They went out there with this U-Haul truck, almost tried to ram them. Shots were fired, and then they sped away.
And these are just, as we see, the last dying kicks of the left. They have no idea what to do. This is the escalation that we have been expecting, and I think it'll continue to get that way. I hope not, but it will.
Yeah, the Democrats
They have nothing left.
The Democrats actually have a plan for civil war. They wrote this out in 2020. Surprisingly, this is on public record. That's the next story we're going to kind of get into. I was surprised when I seen that, but this could fit right into that. So let's show the clip and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
And I haven't even seen the complete clip today.
And this is behind the leftist lines afterwards, so it's kind of a safe place. The people that were firing, that was the line of the ICE agents.
I'm gonna there's music, so I'm trying to cut it a little.
You can just fast forward it if there's music.
That's almost over. Was the driver hit though? Because again, I just found out about this story. And I guess he just sits there.
No, you can play it.
Oh, he was driving.
So it looks like he drove away fine. It almost looks like it was a test run to see what is the protocol if you're going to almost ram them. And if leftists want to try to use this as propaganda to say ICE agents are shooting at us, they rightfully shot at them. There could have been a bomb or anything else at that. The vehicle alone is a massive threat to ICE agents. Also, Antifa's strategy has been changing in recent days. They're wearing less black, they're waving American flags, and they're going in blow-up suits of dinosaurs and other anime characters. They're trying to soften their image so when police or ICE agents kind of go after them, it plays well for the newscast, because so far it hasn't been playing well for the newscast. So they're using these blow-up dino suits and stuff like that.
They're trying to be sympathetic, even though I do think most of the American people and the international audience are kind of catching up and seeing what the actual effects are. Even here in Mexico, we have had some Antifa showings, and most people just see them as annoying, idiotic, and they're losing support more and more, I think. But that just means they're going to continue to escalate, not just Antifa, but the rest of the Democrat Party, which holds them up, essentially.
Well, they were a little bit late to the party because Trump very quickly, and I don't think the Democrats or the left were expecting this, he's completely went after their funding apparatus. We have a few stories where he's still going after them, and some of the hidden sectors they're funneling this money to Antifa and these other organizations is crazy. But a lot of the major funding was coming from USAID, a lot of the UN funding, a lot of these other organizations. So the fact that they were able to stop that, they're not able to pay these protesters in mass for long periods of time. That's why we've seen at the No Kings protest last time, the protesters were there for 2.5 hours so they can get the photo shoot, and then they were gone because there's nobody paying these protesters for the whole day anymore. They can only afford an hour or two.
And then in this last No Kings, which you were following, I wasn't following as much, most of the clips used by the news media were old clips of old protests.
Yeah, it was 2017 clips when those protests were actually massive, but they were using those old clips claiming that this new protest was the biggest protest in history, which was a complete lie. It came out as a fabrication. And it seems like the left has this plan from back in 2020, expecting if Trump won that election, that they were going to invoke a civil war, but they just don't have the ground support. And when they have clips like this coming out, it just makes them look more crazy. The incident with Charlie Kirk just garners no sympathy from the rest of the United States. They're becoming more and more isolated and more radicalized. I think the left tried to do this to the right on January 6th, but the right was kind of hyped to it after January 6th happened, and they didn't engage anymore. They actually went into online spaces, went into debates, started news organizations, kind of like the one we're starting here, and they really started to win the war, change the culture. The left is completely taking the bait and becoming more and more radicalized.
And they're also not used to being the unliked party, the unliked side. The left has always been the peace and the nice and that we help people and the apathetic versions of people, but they're not.
Well, and the more and more violent acts that kind of happen, the moderates are just going more and more to the right wing. Even
at least the center.
It's a big tent party now. They have former liberals, former Democrats, libertarians, rhino conservatives, MAGA conservatives. I mean, you name it. The right is the big tent party now. A lot of countries haven't caught on to this, like Mexico. I mean, Mexico is still rhino Republicans down here. Canada is much of the same. But the countries that have turned the corner into modern populism when it comes to conservatism by inviting libertarians in and other groups have really succeeded and done very, very well for themselves.
Because it helps to strategize better and to have more and more ideas from different sides and different people that then come together and they can actually build something, as we're seeing in the States.
You can take the best ideas from all these different organizations and really metastasize a real movement from it.
But let's see what kind of happened. So from the AP, shots fired, driver hurt and held after truck. Also, they did hold him. After truck rams into Coast Guard base in California. Of course, California. Truck driver who backed into a U.S. Coast Guard base in the San Francisco Bay Area, the site of earlier protests against federal immigration agents, was shot by law enforcement officers and wounded, authorities said Friday. The driver was being held for a mental health evaluation after attempting to weaponize the vehicle to ram into the Coast Guard base Alameda. On Thursday night, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security posted on X, a bystander was struck by a fragment, treated at a hospital, and released. No Coast Guard personnel were hurt.
Yeah, and I'm expecting more and more of this as the weeks and months go on, especially with this government shutdown. The Democrats are trying to apply pressure. The Republicans are offering pretty much to go forward with reopening the government, with making no concessions to either side. That's what's happened over the last 30 votes over the last how many years. Usually when both sides can't come into agreement, they just approve the previous financial order that they had, giving no sway to either side. But the Democrats are refusing to do that now.
And Andy W. says, in a small town outside of Portland, there were people dressed in blow-up unicorn suits that were blocking the roads. And yes, so Of course, and they will continue to do that, and more people, I hope, will continue to see straight through that and say, well, it is still Antifa, it's still the crazy left.
Especially when I watch these protests like the No Kings Day, where they're happening all over the country, I take a special interest in Washington State and Portland, because that's where really the head of Antifa is, or the real heart of Antifa is. To see their strategies and what they do there, it kind of moves across the rest of the nation after that. And they understand that it's not playing well in the news anymore. They're losing the propaganda war. They're losing the moderates. So they need to change their image. And I was watching Tim Pool earlier, and they made a good point. After World War II, the Japanese had a really bad image. So they invested in things like Hello Kitty and other animes, other cartoons, in order to soften their image, and it really did work over time. The Antifa is trying to do the same. So if shots are fired at somebody in a blow-up suit, it's easier to say this was unjustified. The problem is with those blow-up suits, you can't see where people's arms are, and they can actually have a weapon inside the suit.
That too. And I don't think it'll work. I think most people now, with X being, not controlled by the left, and with other sources of information not as controlled by the left, more people and more discernment can be applied to what they're actually doing and what this strategy actually is.
Yeah, I don't know if you read the Podesta report, but this was literally the government, the government as in the liberals when they controlled the government, saying if Trump won in 2020, that they were going to start a civil war. I know there had been talk about that before, but to actually seeing it in writing and to see they had an entire game plan, a lot of this game plan is now coming to a head, but it doesn't seem to be swaying the moderates. If anything, it's pushing the moderates away. And especially now that a lot of news organizations are talking about this Podesta report, and this was an actual thing that was supposed to be put in and implemented if Trump won. Trump won now, but he is going directly after the power bases of the Democratic Party. So I don't think they know what to do right now.
And yes, we do have this from Mari Naffel, and you were talking about it. Alex Jones says the left's secret plan for civil war started in 2020. He was speaking with Tucker Carlson. Let's see if it plays.
And this is a 70-page report that went really in depth on their strategy, what they were going to do if Donald Trump won the election.
What is the Podesta plan?
Well, when I talk about this, I get chills because in August of 2020, Breitbart wrote about it, the Daily Caller wrote about it, but the New York Times wrote about it first. And Podesta does this big Democrat Party war game.
Which Podesta? John
Podesta.
Former White House Chief of Staff, yep.
Absolutely. He comes out of this huge report. They published the whole thing. And I'm reading like this, it was like 70 pages or something. And they say, if Trump wins in 2020, this is in August, months before, which they were able to steal it, so he didn't. He said, we're going to have Western states secede. We're going to have blue cities secede. But we'll start with the Western states, California, Oregon, and Washington. And we'll call it over migrants and sanctuary cities and healthcare at first, which they're now doing. I'm getting chills because it's all happening. Like you go to a play and you're reading, oh, the next act is this. And Romeo and Juliet, I mean, it's all right there. And they say, if he wins, we will say it's illegitimate. We will have blue states first secede and that they're going to be sanctuary cities for the illegals. Then when there's civil unrest, which they'll furnish, Trump will send the National Guard, and then there'll be a massacre of the migrants. And then we will kick off a civil war. Then all the blue cities across the country will secede. Then New York, Massachusetts, and others will secede, and we'll form what we call the Western Alliance. And we will then, the U.S. military will be with us, and that they would then form a military alliance if Trump didn't stand down, and they would march on D.C. Then I saw Gavin Newsom on Colbert about 3 weeks ago, and he said, oh, we're forming, and they hold a map up, the Western Alliance, and it's for migrants and healthcare, and we're getting ready to go on offense. And Colbert goes, he does that demon face, he goes,
Okay, yeah, and that's very interesting because Gavin Newsom is looking to be president. The question is he smart enough to realize that people really aren't on his side? Part of their plan is to have this massacre of migrants, but at these protests, migrants aren't the ones protesting. They may protest in silence or in their homes, but they're not coming out to these protests. These are crazy second-generation radicals.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But now let's go to other news, and it involves Kash Patel. I think you just heard the clip play because I could not stop it. But from Fox News, breaking Kash Patel names multiple high-profile NBA arrests in an alleged illegal gambling ring that spanned years. More than 30 people were arrested in the case, including current and former NBA stars and suspected members of the American branch of the Sicilian Mafia, La Cosa Nostra. Patel said the FBI entered and executed justice against the crime families, including the Bonanno crime family, Gambino crime family, Genovese crime family, and Luquen's crime family. Are we back in the 50s, 60s?
Well, the thing is, they're having a lot of, I wouldn't say superstars, but a lot of like pretty well-known NBA names actually engaging in this. And when you watch the clips, it's very obvious these people were throwing games. And not just throwing games, they were engaging in giving tip-offs, claiming they had injuries so they wouldn't be involved in the game. And then it would be very easy to make large money bets on these things.
I know nothing about gambling or betting, so this is more for you.
Well, and this is more about the America really trying to clean up a lot of its industries and coming to terms with the American public, whether it's the JFK files. I'm very disappointed in what happened with Epstein. They still need to clear that up. But going after these high profile cases like this shows nobody's above the law, but leads kind of by example, at least with this.
So let's see.
Individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today. Former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated take.
Yeah, and it's spanned the course of years, which brings me up some really big questions because the NBA has been the wokest sports league of any sports league. That means the Biden administration had to know about all of this. Maybe they kept them in line as long as they were, praising to the LGBTQ flag or whatever whatever flags they wanted.
And kneeling.
Maybe they would look the other way. The Trump administration isn't looking the other way. They're taking up a lot of these case files and actually laying down prosecutions. It is really good to see. Let's continue.
Down across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing. Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Casa Nostra to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families. Individuals such...
Yeah, and I'm thinking a lot of these crime families, especially these ones that we know from the 50s, because it's really Mexican cartels that run a lot of these things in the United States now and have a lot of the power base. A lot of these other organizations have actually legitimized their money, and they're involved in, I would say, more acceptable crimes like gambling crimes and things like this.
Do you think they're using this kind of, we're going after this and that to not have to talk about the Epstein cases and the other stuff that should be front and center?
Well, I think they definitely are. That's part of it, but I think it's a multi-pronged operation. They get a lot of benefits out of this. They're probably trying to flip a lot of those Italian mafia members on Mexican cartel members because they're probably doing business together and they're going after the Mexican cartel pretty hard right now. And we do have a story of that later on.
From NBC News, inside the federal gambling case that ensnared NBA stars and mobsters, the U.S. Attorney in Brooklyn outlined 2 cases, an insider sports betting scheme and a high-tech plot to rig underground poker games. Interesting. Do you want me to go into it?
Oh, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Winning is typically a good thing for the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. Why is that city always coming up? Why is that state always coming up? Where do you want me to go?
Oh, right there is fine.
Billups, Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, and dozens of others were charged Thursday as part of 2 sweeping investigations, one into the sports gambling and the other one into poker rigging schemes backed by the mafia, allegedly. The extraordinary federal takedown led to the arrests of more than 30 people across 11 states on charges including wire fraud, money laundering, extortion, robbery, and illegal gambling. FBI Kash Patel said the fraud is mind-boggling.
Yeah, a couple of the things when I was looking into this case were a lot of these NBA players weren't no-name NBA players. Some of these guys were making hundreds of millions of dollars, meaning they didn't need money. So why would they be involved in something like this? And the only answer I could kind of come up with was the fact they probably had been doing this all the way from college, and they continued to do it all the way up into the NBA. But because the people that were paying these players to do this in college, even when they did want to stop and they did get the big contract, they weren't able to stop because they would have had blackmail material on them at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is much more widespread and it goes a lot into college. I'm willing to guess it probably goes into the draft as well, where if certain players they have that take these bribes are going to get drafted in the NBA draft. So.
And now let's go with someone that used to be crazy, but apparently is now the only voice of reason of the Democrat Party, which is John Fetterman. Yeah, John Fetterman. I almost said Sean. From Eric Doherty says, John Fetterman says, as soon as Kamala Harris called President Trump a fascist, I knew we lost the plot. This extreme rhetoric makes it easier for these extreme actions, like what happened to Charlie Kirk, and now they can't allow people to grieve.
Yeah, and I will say this about John Fetterman. He does have some traditional liberal views. He's more of a traditional liberal. And if there were more liberals in the Democratic Party like this, I think they would be much more like the moderates would come over to them in a lot more numbers than they are right now. They're really driving everybody away. But after he had his brain injury, he's kind of recovered somewhat. And his divorce with his crazy leftist wife, he seems to be a new John Fetterman. And I think he should be the voice of the Democratic Party compared to anybody else. But the Democrats absolutely hate him because he doesn't side with the radicals.
Mm-hmm. Who are the ones that right now apparently are trying to get control of the entire party.
Well, that's why the Democrats...
And it's being handed over to them as well.
Well, that's why the Democrats won't stop the government shutdown, because the radical wing of their party won't let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, and I've always refused to say that. And when then the Vice President Harris referred to President Trump as a fascist, and I knew absolutely we lost the plot at that point. You know, if you call the president or someone like a fascist, you're effectively calling the people that are going to vote for him, and then they must be fascists too, or they support fascism and those things, and that's just not true. That's just not it. I happen to know, and I love a lot of people that voted for the president, and they're not fascists, they're not Nazis, they're not trying to destroy the Constitution and all those things. They just happen to have a different priorities, and they love our country in the same ways that Democrats do as well. So I refuse to do those kinds of a thing, because that kind of extreme kinds of rhetoric makes it easier for those kinds of extreme kinds of actions, even like what happened to poor Charlie Kirk and that. And now why you can't allow people to grieve and now use that an opportunity to criticize or to turn it into something. It's like, it's just basic humanity.
Pause it for a second. We're going to finish it off. But I will say this. I don't know why more Democrats aren't like this. As much as he might sound like a conservative here, a lot of his policies are traditional liberal. If it was between voting for him or voting for a rhino conservative, I would probably vote for him. Now, you put a MAGA conservative against him, I'm going to vote MAGA every time. But in this particular case, especially in his state, they're putting up a lot of rhinos against him. So he's not a bad choice, even though he isn't Democrat.
Like, we're forgetting that we need each other. We need each other here. And now I refuse to be a part of it and comparing people to Hitler and those things, because if that's what's required to win, then I refuse to.
And right now it does seem like that is what is required to win.
Well, they went on in that clip, and I watched a longer clip actually, where they said, the Democratic Party is thinking about putting somebody up against you. He said, I'm not scared. Let them do what they want, because he realizes he's appealing to both sides. Even Republicans are willing to cross the aisle and vote for him, especially in a Democratic primary.
But did he get divorced? Because he was wearing a wedding ring. I was trying to look it up.
Yeah, him and his wife went through a separation shortly after he had his brain injury, I believe.
But are they back together?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I don't think he would be talking like that if he was. She's a lot more radical than he was.
But why is he wearing a wedding ring?
Maybe they haven't been divorced yet.
I'm nosy.
Okay, let's continue on.
Yeah, but you would take it off.
Maybe he got remarried.
No, that quickly. Let's go jump back to Canada from Mark Nixon. The C.D. Howe Institute just handed out grades. Alberta got an A+, Quebec a B+, Ontario B-, and Ottawa a D, a fail. Can't balance the spreadsheet, can't release the budget, can't tell the truth. Mark Carney's fiscal masterclass is about to collapse in real time, which is a continuation of what we started with.
Yeah, Ottawa and the federal government are the ones that got these D grades. These are failing grades. I think they should actually be Fs. Alberta did very well, and they're the ones really floating the Canadian economy at this point. And there may be a separation vote next year. I really hope Alberta does separate, or Canada gets their shit in line and stops treating Albertans like a doormat.
Hours after the Prime Minister's address, the CD Howe Institute released its latest fiscal accountability report cards for not just the federal government, but for the provinces too. For more on this, let's bring in CTV's Scott Hurst. He's joining us from the National Newsroom. Scott, how did the provinces and the federal government compare in this year's report?
Good morning, Marcia. Let's begin.
Yeah, and the federal government's getting a D on this, and they haven't even released their new economic strategy, which is supposed to be $100 billion. Canada is a small country when it comes to population, so $100 billion, I think they're going to be getting an F next year.
With the federal government, because of course that impacts all of us, and it appears Ottawa is not making the grade in the new fiscal accountability report card released by the CD Howe Institute. As you mentioned in his address last night, the Prime Minister pledged generational investments, but also talked about sacrifices, all the while Canadians have still not yet seen the latest budget. And overall, that is one of the main concerns pointed out by the CD Howe Institute's report card on senior government.
And the budget is supposed to be released next Wednesday, almost a year late. This could trigger an election in Canada. I expect a lot of more Canadian news to be coming out, especially after next Wednesday. It's going to be very interesting what happens in Canada, especially with what's going on in Trump and Canada and the United States and Mexico. This could result in Mexico getting a better deal than expected.
Too many budgets are late, and most governments take far too long to produce their financial statements. So here is the overall report card. Here's how the class did. Alberta topped the class with an A+, Quebec there with a B+, a whole lot of provinces there coming in with a B, Ontario being given a B-, where you see the federal government there far over to the right of your screen with a D, not a great grade. And the report points out that the feds have been late in both its budget and financial statements, presenting estimates using different accounting, burying some key numbers deep in its budget, and also having a large gap between its projected and actual results. And to make matters worse, Ottawa is on track to be the only senior government to get a failing grade next year. Now at the bottom of the class with D- grades were Manitoba and Northwest Territories, Marcia.
And that's good. And this being said, a lot of those countries that got bad grades, it's because provinces that got bad grades. The federal government is just not allowing them to unleash their the fundamental economic leverage that they have, which is their natural resources. Canada has an abundance of wealth. The federal government wants to adhere to these green policies, which are absolutely bankrupting the country and putting the Canadian people under immense hardship.
I disappeared.
Okay.
I'll go to this one and you can go fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. We told you there would be technical difficulties. If Rafa is still watching, this is just for you, apparently. Sorry about that. We should be back now. I'll wait for him to come sit back down. Yes, there I am. Thank you.
Okay.
But let's now jump back over to the US with Mark Cuban. Funnily enough, from Defiant L's Mark Cuban announces he's teaming up with Trump on Trump RX. Trump announced Trump RX last month, saying the website will allow Americans to shop directly for prescription drugs at discounted rates without insurance.
Yeah, and we have to remember Mark Cuban is one of the leftist billionaires that were really going after Trump. He was really the Elon Musk of the left, especially in election season and long
he'd
before
like to
that.
think. He'd like to think.
He's nowhere near that. He looks like a crazy man that got lucky on some investments. That being said, the fact that he's willing to cooperate with Trump and Trump's willing to cooperate with him shows there isn't major opportunities to reach across the aisle. John Fetterman's also reaching across the aisle. Mm-hmm. And the more Democrats that do reach across the aisle, it makes the others look far more radical, especially when they're demanding to continue this government shutdown.
Mm-hmm. To fund healthcare, funnily enough, for illegal
And by the way, I was watching, they're doing mass deportations in Mexico now of illegal immigrants because the economy is fragile here as well. And it has the same downfalls that it would in the United States. It brings down the lowest wages. So it hurts the most vulnerable in the society.
We'll work with Trump RX. I mean, it's incredible. It's stupendous. It's like the most incredible program ever. And so we're excited to offer them our API so that they'll be able to download our daily prices. So when they go down, everybody benefits. Plus, I like what they're doing with the MFNs because, as I mentioned in my comments, our brand drugs are more expensive because PBMs are involved. And with Trump RX and the MFN program, that allows manufacturers to work around the PBMs and work directly to patients. So I think it'll save seniors, it'll save everybody a lot of money.
You think this is the future?
I don't think it solves the ultimate problem of how the system is designed, but I think it's something that we obviously agree on because that's what Cost Plus Drugs is. We publish our entire price list every day.
Your company posts drug prices with full cost breakdowns. How does this transparency help save patients money?
I mean, you know, with costplusdrugs.com, any patient can just go look at their price for their medication. And so there's no uncertainty. But more importantly, by seeing our markup of only 15% and seeing our costs, that builds trust. I always tell everybody in our company that what we really sell in this industry is trust. And so I think that's what's really allowed us to grow so quickly.
Okay, that's good. And Trump was really going into this in the end of his first administration, and he was trying to repeal drug costs in the United States so it would cost pennies rather than thousands of dollars because it's charged directly to insurance. But he put that in through executive order at the end of his first term, and Biden came right in there because he has major medical lobbyists and repealed that executive order. So now that Trump's back in, he's able to do this. And it was very interesting because I was watching an interview with Bernie Sanders, and oh God, I can't remember. It may have been Colbert. Interviewing Bernie Sanders, and he's actually saying Trump is taking a lot of your policies that you had when it came to Medicare and other things. And Bernie Sanders was forced to admit, yeah, some of the stuff Trump is doing is actually socialized medicine.
And here from Fortune, Mark Cuban says Trump's new drug platform could succeed if it forces pharma managers to change. If that happens, Trump gets all the credit. So it's quite a turn of the leaf or turn of pages.
Well,
I don't know
this
what
is gonna
metaphor
mean,
I'm trying to do.
This could mean billions of dollars to Mark Cuban, which I don't necessarily like Mark Cuban, but it's a win for the American people. It's a win for the Trump administration as well. But the person that's going to benefit the most is Mark Cuban because he's going to be first to market because, like he said, he is transparent with the drug prices and how much they're profiting off each drug, which does build trust with the American people. As much as I don't like Mark Cuban, good on him, I guess. And at least he is willing to work with Trump, even though
and that's the main thing.
he's had massive Trump derangement syndrome. So if he can come around, it's showing really anybody can come around.
And Rafa asks, will there be a VIP live today? Yes, we'll eventually go to RUMBLE. Not yet, but in a few stories.
We had quite a few stories today because we've been off for so long, so I've been slowly accumulating them.
Yes, and I'm guessing you accumulated this one a while ago from Defiant L.
Funny.
Liberal woman hops on TikTok to ask others for advice if she should divorce her MAGA husband. Yes, spare him.
And this is why you don't date a liberal woman. This is my advice to all men. And this is why I have the lovely Nat. And with all of her flaws, she's at least a conservative.
Funnily enough, I turned him, so you should be thanking me.
Hi. This is my first TikTok, so I'm kind of nervous to post this, but I'm just wondering.
She has a crazy eye.
This is her first TikTok, and I hope her husband sees this.
If there's anyone else out there like me who is married to a MAGA. I have been thinking about leaving since the election, and we ended up going to counseling, which honestly really doesn't help because I'm not going to change my views and he's not going to change his views. I don't really see any other way out of this except for divorce. I don't know what to do. It's painful. I still love him. And I honestly did think that once this crazy person took office and all of these things started happening to our country, which they are now, my husband would see it and he would say, damn, maybe not even admit he's wrong, but just, damn, no, I'm not on this side. But he appears to be doubling down and making excuses for what is going on.
And pause it. And he's doubling down because Trump's actually following through with his promises. And if the United States wants to have any opportunity not to hand the world's economy over to China, they're going to have to take radical action, and they're going to have to do exactly what Trump's doing to even have a chance.
And I don't know, I live in reality, and I can't split my world and live in reality and also live in this fantasy that everything is fine. Is anyone with me? Any advice?
No. And that being said, I do recommend to all men to talk about religion and talk about politics. Talk about the issues they say don't talk over the dinner table with your family, especially with the person you're going to be dating, potentially marrying in the future. You want to know those things because those issues are the most important issues, especially when you have children. This is going to cause an absolute rift. This is not the only clip that we've shown over the last few months. We've shown other clips that are far more advanced than this, where they had children, then they divorced, and then the mother wanted to transition the children against the father's will, and they're living in a liberal state, which is completely backing up the women's choice to do all this stuff and prosecuting the men.
And I'm against divorce 100%. I don't believe in divorce. Sorry. But I do think that in this case, or in cases like this, just step away from the craziness of the left, of these women, of them being completely hopped up on SSRIs and who knows what else, birth control, etc. That's melting their brains because there's no way to reason with a terrorist, space terrorist, and they will never see, clear clarity or clear unless they want to, but usually they don't.
Yeah.
So just step away, save yourself.
And the more they talk about this thing, especially with Trump in office, the more radicalized she's going to get.
And the more insane they look
She's
as well.
obviously watching mainstream media and eating everything hand over fist, but...
And as Guy said, it is very important to talk about these things when you first start dating someone, especially in certain cities, but just in general, so you're on the same page. The fact that you shouldn't or can't talk about it might actually make your life a lot worse and a lot more difficult in the long run if you don't know who you're actually committing to.
Yeah, I mean, especially for guys that are potentially going to have a one-night stand, this is the reason you want to use protection, because if you are involved in a one-night stand, you don't know any of her political views, any of her religious views. If she happens to get pregnant, there can be some serious consequences. And yeah, just...
and it's not like we don't know this story. I forget the name of the now activist. He's a man, but he had a one-night stand. The lady turned out completely crazy, partly schizophrenic. They had a kid together, and then she wanted to transition the kid. And he spent years in court fighting for his own son to be left alone, and so he could raise him. I believe he eventually kind of won, but he's still having to go to court. If I remember the name,
we've showed it a few times on the show.
But again, it's not like made up and all just scary stories. It is actually happening out there, so be careful.
And why don't we go over to RUMBLE now for the last few stories?
So we'll go.
I left kind of barely. I've marked the wall so we can hang the picture here.
Yeah,
so.
Our little tree that used to be on our other set is gonna go there.
Hopefully on Monday we have it. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so.
Yes.
We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize the channel.
So now we're going over to the VIP live, as Rafa says, on RUMBLE. Oh, Rafa says something before. Before we go, Rafa says, one-night stands, besides being immoral, are a danger to both women and men. Yes, exactly. Don't have them.
Yeah, but I will say this. I used to work at a bar as a bouncer, and a ton of people are engaged in this behavior. And in order to avoid the long-term consequences, you really should use protection if you are going to engage in that. Not that it is a good thing to engage in, but if you are, and a lot of people are, you do not want to deal with the consequences of a crazy liberal woman that's now pregnant. I mean, a lot of liberals love abortion, so maybe you get out of it, but I don't know.
Okay, we're going over to RUMBLE. Subscribe, like, thank you so much. We'll see you over there. 1 second. Okay,
And
you can say Rumble now.
Okay.
And I gotta grab the chat for anybody that wants to send messages.